Amazing. Thank you so much for that. So, welcome again, everyone. Good evening. And this is Evenings with Environmentalists. So, that works out really well. This is the second event of a three-part series where we address the impacts of really important environmental issues in a very informal setting. So, today's event will be all about examining the impacts of environment on public health. Towards the second half of our event, we will open it up for audience-led Q&A. But in the meantime, we welcome everyone to type in your reactions or any questions you have in the chat. We would really love to hear what you're thinking as we are having this discussion. Um, and before we get started, I want to briefly introduce our student moderator. Firstly, my name is Mashiad Ahmed. I am a sophomore at Johns Hopkins University. I'm studying behavioral biology and public health studies, and really excited to be here with y'all today. Ethan, if you want to get us started next.
Hi, my name is Ethan. I am a junior. I'm also an undergraduate at Johns Hopkins University, and I'm a double major in environmental studies and psychology with a minor in econ. And I work with Jess in the Office of Sustainability as an eco representative.
Hi everyone, my name is Talia. I'm a sophomore undergrad and I'm studying environmental studies and international studies. And I am also a intern with the Office of Sustainability.
Thank you. So we have two wonderful speakers today. First, we have Dr. Lam. Yukyan Lam is a public health scientist working on environmental justice at the Natural Resources Defense Council, or NRDC, which is a nonprofit national environmental advocacy organization. She holds a bachelor's degree in physics from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a JD from Harvard Law School, and a PhD from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Dr. Lam's current research focuses on the cumulative impacts of environmental threats and social vulnerability in low-income communities and communities of color in the US. And we also have Dr. Wilson. Dr. Sacoby Wilson is an associate professor with the Maryland Institute for Applied Environmental Health and Department of Epidemiology and Biostatistics in the University of Maryland, College Park School of Public Health. That's a really long title. Dr. Wilson has 15 years of experience as an environmental health scientist. He works primarily in partnership with community-based organizations to study and address environmental justice and health issues and translate research to action. Additionally, Dr. Wilson is a co-founder of the DMV Environmental Justice Coalition and founder of 17 for Peace and Justice, an environmental justice advocacy organization. Thank you both for joining us. We would love to open up the floors for you to briefly introduce your primary work, why it's important to you, and what shaped your career interest. Dr. Wilson, if you could get us started.
Okay, how many minutes do I have in this part?
About 3 minutes, but
okay, cool. I want to stay on time. Keep me on time. Good. So so I'm Dr. Wilson. I primarily do environmental justice research and advocacy. My lab is the Community Engagement Environmental Justice and Health Lab. And so we, as a lab, do work to do consultation, technical assistance to communities that are impacted by environmental injustice in the DMV region and across the country. And the whole point of our lab is we do science empowerment model, not empowerment with an EM, but empowerment with an IN, helping people use science to actualize their own power, speak with their own voices. And the way I got into this work, I met Dr. Robert Bullard, who is called the father of the EJ movement, and Dr. Benjamin Chavis, who coined the term environmental racism at a conference at Elizabeth City State University back in 1995. I was an undergrad at Alabama A&M University studying biology, ecotoxicology, and environmental science. And so when I met them at that conference in 95, I knew what I wanted to do. Also at that conference, I met Mustafa Ali, who's one of my fraternity brothers. So I've known Mustafa for 25 years. Hopefully he'll be the next head of the EPA, crossing our fingers. But yeah, so I've been doing EJ work for a long time. Started as an undergrad student. I got to UNC Chapel Hill. and learned under the people's professor, Dr. Steve Wing, who unfortunately passed away 4 years ago. But Dr. Wing was the leading researcher looking at EJ issues in CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations in North Carolina. So I really got my training doing EJ work under Dr. Wing's wings, but also working with the North Carolina EJ Network, working with community folk like Omega Wilson with the West End Revitalization Association, learning how to do science for the people, science for social justice, and science for change. And so I learned that if you want to really address environmental injustice, you got to empower folks, but you can't do pain pimping science, you can't do extractive science, you can't do helicopter science. Folks are tired of being guinea pigs. You got to decolonize science, right? And so we got to make sure that folks who most impacted by the issues are the ones driving the science. So I try to do community-driven science, and I try to do science where I'm engaging and working with the real subject matter experts, the folks on the front line and fence line. So in my work, we're looking at air quality issues in DMV, building Harper local air quality monitoring networks in Cheverly, Maryland, St. Mary's County, doing work on CAFOs, chicken farms in Eastern Shore. We're looking at stormwater EJ issues from funding from NSF, looking at disasters, flooding, and toxic releases from funding from EPA in Charleston, South Carolina, where I've been working in Charleston on the Port of Charleston for about 13 years. Also in Duplin County, North Carolina, working on hog farms. I've done work in Baltimore with Free Your Voice, with United Workers, right? In West Baltimore, on Watershed 263 on stormwater issues. Done some work with folks in Turner Station, right? And also do work in Savannah, Georgia on air quality. Do work in Uniontown, Alabama. You may know about Uniontown near Selma, landfill issues and other EJ issues. Do work in Houston, Texas, right? With EDF and folks in the Atzel community, Pleasantville. Also do work in the Gulf Coast through Dr. Bullett's and Dr. Beverly Wright's Gulf Coast Health Equity Consortium. I'm also on NEJAC, the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council. So advise the EPA on EJ issues. I'm on the board of the Citizen Science Association, trying to bring in JEDI into the Citizen Science Association, particularly environmental justice, right? I'm also on the National Academy of Sciences Board of Environmental Studies and Toxicology. Again, bringing environmental justice to the National Academy of Sciences. So I do a lot of stuff at the community level, also working on policy, and the whole idea is to advance environmental justice, we got to use science that empowers folks. Science is not an end, science is a means, and we need to have more inclusive science, more science that focuses on justice, and more science for the people. And I'll stop there.
Dr. Lam, would love to hear from you next.
Yeah, thank you. So my path is a little bit strange. So actually, after graduating from undergrad, I went to law school because after studying very theoretical physics for some time, I realized, wow, I need to do something that actually has an impact on the real world. So I went to law school, as people do when they're trying to figure out what to do next. And I became a human rights lawyer, and I worked in South America. Specifically, I lived in Bogota, Colombia, and I worked with Afro-Colombian populations there, so Black and Indigenous communities in Colombia, and really saw the connection between the violation of human rights and the lack of respect for land rights, natural resource rights that really truly belong to those communities. And I also started to really see there the connections between these violations of human rights and the impact on people's health. I was working there, litigating cases, doing that for about 5 years or so, and really thought that like if there was stronger scientific evidence in some of these human rights cases that we're bringing, you know, we could actually show the impact, the actual harm from, for example, this extractive mine that was placed on indigenous land, right in the backyards of where these communities were living. And that got me really interested in doing a degree in public health and really focusing my education in public health on the social determinants of health, on really looking at the political and economic factors that drive disparities in health. So after graduating from Hopkins with my PhD, it was, that was around 2017, and I was looking around at the situation in the country in 2017, as many of you might have also been doing the same thing, and realizing, wow, we need to do a lot of work at home. And so I kind of shifted from a more international focus in my work to a much more domestic one. And that's when I started working with NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and with their environmental justice team. The EJ team at NRDC is actually very small. It's an organization-wide, there's some 700 staff right now with NRDC, but the folks that are actually on the EJ team, we're about 10 of us. So it's not, it's not most of the work that we're doing. I say, unfortunately, that's sort of my own personal view, but it is important work nonetheless. And I do work on a range of topics. I work in a number of cities. So in Chicago, we have EJ partners that are in the Little Village area in the southeast side of Chicago. Some of these organizations you may have heard of, Little Village Environmental Justice Organization, the Southeast Environmental Task Force, SETF, Southeast Side Coalition to Ban Pet Coke. These are, very, very important grassroots organizations that often operate with very small budgets, but do an incredible amount of work. In Newark, New Jersey, I've been working with the Ironbound Community Corporation, ICC. They have been fighting just a number of huge facilities in their backyards for many, many years. So, everything from like a fat rendering plant to major highways and port traffic to incinerator that is producing terrible air quality for the communities in the Ironbound section of Newark. And in Houston, we also have been working with this group called the Texas Environmental Justice Advocacy Services, TEJAS. They are located in Houston Ship Channel, which if many of you are familiar with the Houston Ship Channel, it's really kind of the belly of the beast there, right? It's this huge industrialized 50-mile stretch of land where there are just petrochemical facilities on both sides of the channel. There's no real zoning laws, so communities are literally living at the fence line. Like if you see these pictures where you can see like a school, baseball field is like literally there's like this chain link fence is the only thing separating them from some refinery that's just constantly flaring and emitting all sorts of things into the air. So yeah, so that's the kind of work that I'm doing now, is partnering with those groups, really figuring out, okay, like how do I lend my expertise to whatever they are seeing as their main advocacy goals. So that's kind of the model that we try to use at least with the EJ team's work. It's, we don't define the questions. We don't define the research questions because of some notion of what we have in our heads as like important. It's more, okay, what are the real lived experiences? What are the problems that people are facing? And then we go from there. Is it data that they need? Is it a litigation strategy? Is it some sort of campaign? Whatever that is, we try to kind of step in and fill a little bit of that role.
Thank you both so much for your introductions. We'd love to get started by asking a couple of questions to you guys. And while our speakers are responding, if anyone would like to ask follow-up questions or just like general questions, feel free to type that in the chat, or if there's like a break, unmute yourself and ask. And then after our kind of like guiding questions, we'll open it up for an audience-led Q&A. So our first question for both of our panelists, and I think both of you really touched on this in your introductions, but how has scientific research and data informed your support for communities facing environmental injustice? In other words, how has your research translated into direct action? And what does this process look like?
You can go first.
Yeah, sure. So sort of what I was hinting at before is that our process is one where we, through partnerships that we've had, and we usually don't do kind of like one-off like projects. So a lot of the partners that we have, the EJ organizations, they've been partners with NRDC for a number of years, and we kind of work together and build like a history, right? Because that trust building takes a very long time. And being in contact with those organizations, like we have some sense, like a little bit of, like our finger on the pulse of what is going on the ground. And it's from there that we identify, okay, like this is an advocacy priority for groups here. Oh, looks like maybe there's a, new administration or an agency that's looking to do something on, X, Y, and Z topic. And if the interests align and it seems like there's opportunity to really make change there, then we say, okay, now what do we need to really catalyze that? So it's very much, advocacy priority driven. And in the case of my work, those priorities are defined by our community partners.
Yeah, to add to that. So I follow the community engagement continuum. That may be something that y'all want to look up for those of you in public health, where you start out the left-hand side, you have outreach, so you move to involvement, consultation, then you have participatory research and community-driven. So as you move from left to right, trust increases, communication increases, and also impact increases. Outreach is very one-directional. And so that's not, so you want to have bidirectionality when you get to kind of community involvement. The relationships build over time, right? And then, a big part of what I do is community-based participatory research. So if you know about the CBPR framework, communities engaged in all stages of the research process. So developing the research questions, study design, helping with data collection, helping with analysis in some cases, also dissemination and translation of action. And we also do community-driven research. So communities, let me say this, y'all, anybody can be a scientist. You don't have to have a PhD to be a scientist. And so I think that's part of the problem when we had an erosion in trust in science. You think about this anti-science administration, the Trump administration, right? Because we made science as something afar on top of an ivory tower, right? Where we're using science right now. We wear science, we watch science, we ride in science, we turn science on and off, we eat science, we breathe science, something that's bad science, right? So we got to make science, increase science literacy, and make science every day, make it proximal, and make it pocketbook, right? And so we got to have more diversity and inclusion in science. And for me, doing this work, the folks who are most impacted are the best, have the best data, the best knowledge, right? So Mildred McLean, who I work with in Savannah, she says, folks at the front line, the fence line, they're the true subject matter experts. So we need to uplift them. They need to be leading the way in the science that's being done. And they have, in Bayesian terms, what we call specificatory knowledge. I have general knowledge. I know a lot about EJ. I'm an EJ encyclopedia. But guess what? I don't live in the EJ community. I live in Bowie. Got food oasis, not dealing with food apartheid, right? We don't have any hazards like landfills and incinerators. Like for those of you know about Baltimore and Curtis Bay, the major super polluters, the second largest trash incinerator, Willebrator, they stopped the largest trash incinerator, Energy Answers, from being built. You got the medical waste incinerator, right? You got, all industrial activities, you got all the diesel truck traffic. I don't live there. I live in a place that has a little bit of traffic. So the folks who live in Curtis Bay, right? Like Destiny Watford, folks with Free Your Voice, folks that live in Turner Station, right? Baltimore County. You know your history, Hopkins. Who else is from Turner Station? Henrietta Lacks. Another issue to talk about for another day, right? But those folks who live in those communities, they are the real subject matter experts. So for me, CBPR, we build partnerships. As already said, doing this work, you have to build relationships. And a lot of communities have a lot of baggage, man. This is important for you as students. You cannot do extractive science. You may want to do a service learning project. That's not a bad thing. But if you're going to work in a community, you got to work for that community for multiple semesters because you're going to get a degree working with them. What are they going to get from working with you? What's the outcome? So you can have meaningful processes, right? But how can your work as students help to transform communities? Did you help increase air quality, increase water quality, reduce overcrowded housing? Think about COVID-19 and why some communities have these risk factors: lack of access to clean air, right? Lack of access to clean water so they can wash their hands, right? Lack of access to healthcare, lack of access to good food because of food apartheid. So, science is really, really important in this work, but it's really about scientific tools being used to capture and document what they're experiencing. And so let them tell their own stories through science. One of the 17 principles of environmental justice is self-determination. So we got to bring scientific tools, partnerships, resources, so folks can determine themselves what actions need to be taken and how the science is done. So I'll stop there because I can talk about this all night, and I can talk too much about it, but go ahead. Next question.
Yeah, okay. So this is also very related. The next question is for Dr. Wilson. And it's, as the director of the Community Engagement, Environmental Justice and Health Laboratory, how do you ensure that the laboratory best supports communities facing environmental justice and environmental health concerns? And I think you expanded on this quite a bit, but feel free to maybe certain examples.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple examples. So I started, you know, well, I'll give you an old school example and I'll come back to a recent example. So I started as a grad student working on these EJ issues, I said, with Dr. Wing. But I want to talk about my work with Omega Wilson. This is a community west of Chapel Hill. I went to UNC Chapel Hill that was dealing with a lack of basic amenities. You know, not having sewer and water infrastructure. These are what we call these are post-slavery freedmen's communities, right? But the town of Mebane, where they are, developed around them. So you think about segregation, right? Exclusionary zoning development, right? And the sewer and water lines ran through their neighborhoods, but they were not connected. So you know, see the embeddedness of racism in how we plan on develop. So that's part of the example, right? They had leaking underground storage tanks. They had a highway that's going to be built to the community. And you see this all the time. Highways being built between historic Black communities, destroying cemeteries, destroying churches, right? And then they weren't connected to sewer water lines, but they hosted the sewage treatment plant. So adding insult to injury, right? So we help train folks in citizen science to collect their own water quality data, water samples to look at water quality, well water, a lot of them on well water, city water, et cetera. And they use the information to submit an administrative complaint, and they're able to stop that highway from being built. And they were able to get first-time installation of sewer water infrastructure. So we got people's roads paid for the first time. We got people's sewer and water. This is why this is a grad student working with a community partner. And going back to community engagement continuum, they came up with a community-driven research framework called community-owned and managed research. So a fun fact, I have more papers from that work as a PhD student than from my actual dissertation. So y'all can look up that work. So I just want to share that and a way for y'all as students to work with communities. And I still work with Omega. It's been 20 years. I was just on the phone call with Omega today because he's part of the Environmental Justice Practitioners Working Group of the Citizen Science Association. I'm on the board. And we were talking about JEDI issues and what we need to do for Citizen Science Association to, again, provide tools of support for communities with these issues. Now, in DC area, we've been doing work in Bladensburg, Maryland, where they had a concern about a concrete batching plant that was going to get an exception to expand. And so they came to me to provide testimony on the air quality EJ issues associated with that. That led to a partnership with them. We did some air quality monitoring, and we were able to stop that facility from expanding. We've also done work in Brandywine, Maryland. If y'all know anything about Brandywine, Brandywine is a major EJ community in the state of Maryland. They have 5 power plants in a 13-mile radius, three in the 3-mile radius of the town. The town is unincorporated. So we unincorporated, don't have a town mayor, don't have a town council. It's basically contamination representation. A lot of parts of our country, colonials and the borders, parts of, you go to some of our reservations, you got people who are unincorporated, right? So they got the power plants, they got a sludge lagoon, Superfund site. They got a coal ash landfill that's near the only park in the community. And we provide testimony again, did air quality monitoring, provide testimony on EJ issues, and we stopped that coal-fired power plant from getting a new permit. We also work with the community group, the B2B Coalition, to submit an administrative complaint about the differential permitting of those power plants in that community they were not in compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. That complaint did not lead to those power plants not being built, but it did lead to some additional civil rights guidance that the agencies like Department of Transportation, Department of Natural Resources, Public Service Commission, and Maryland Department of Environment had to adhere to. So I'll stop there. But a lot of technical assistance, consultation, which could lead to actual partnerships in some cases, or sometimes it's just short-term engagement where we provide scientific evidence and support, okay?
Thank you. Dr. Lam, this next question is for you. Could you discuss your Chicago cumulative impacts map that you created, and I guess kind of like explain what that is for people that don't know, and then also elaborate if your mapping analysis could be used to examine environmental injustice in other areas of the country?
Yeah, sure. And I think this is the issue of cumulative impacts. I'll do my best to explain, but I think Dr. Wilson also is an expert in this. So if he needs to add anything that I've missed or misstated,
I just
please.
had a conversation a few minutes ago with colleagues at National Wildlife Federation. So
I literally just read your paper today on the
okay,
Maryland
cool.
EJ screen tool. So that was really interesting. So I'll give you a bit of like sort of background. So the term cumulative impacts, what does it mean? All right. So the situation with frontline communities, as you've already kind of heard, is that they are not usually just faced with, one pollutant at a time or one facility at a time or even one type of pollution, say air pollution at a time, right? The situation is that they are facing multiple things at the same time, right? They live next to the factory, under the highway, with really, maybe on land that had some legacy contamination. And they also are facing, in many cases, situations, social circumstances that can amplify their vulnerability or susceptibility to the impacts of being exposed to those hazards. So what I mean is, there are things like health insurance status, maybe education, linguistic isolation, transportation, housing, all of those factors that we know, along with, underlying health conditions, all of those factors are also present and co-occurring with these multiple hazards, right? And these hazards and social factors, when they come together, they're going to create, a harmful situation that if you just analyze a single thing at a time, a single impact at a time, you're going to completely miss. So the idea behind trying to analyze all of these things, all of these impacts, what we call cumulative impacts, has been around for some time, right? And so there have been certain tools that have been created in different states, like California has a cumulative impacts analysis tool. It's a mapping tool that takes a number of social and environmental factors and tries to essentially rank all the census tracts in California according to how they score if you were to account for all of these different variables. Now, in Chicago and Illinois, there hasn't been such a tool. There wasn't a tool. And when I started working with the EJ groups that I named, actually the Chicago ones around 2017, they were in the midst of this process in the city of Chicago called the Industrial Corridor Modernization Project. And so it was from former Mayor Rahm Emanuel. He had this idea like, oh, we're going to take the industrial corridors in Chicago and we're going to like redevelop them somehow, and it's going to be great. And so they were supposed to do these community consultation as part of the Industrial Corridor Modernization Project. And we got very concerned because they were going into communities that we had partners with, meeting with those partners and telling them very disturbing things. Like they were saying, for example, to our partners in the Little Village area, it's like, hey, so we've taken a look at your community and we're looking at your situation. And actually, it seems like if you look at your situation here, you guys don't have a problem with industry. You guys don't have problems with health. If you look at these certain health indicators, your life expectancy, that doesn't seem so bad. And, oh, well, maybe things like obesity, yeah, maybe you have a problem there, but for these other things, you're doing fine, right? And so what's like, implicit in there is sort of like this victim blaming kind of thing, like, oh, wow, like if you actually have a problem with health that you see, it's actually your own fault because of your diet or your lack of exercise or whatever it is, right? And then they also started showing them these data like, oh, if you just look at ozone, that actually you're not doing that bad compared to every other place in Chicago or in Illinois. You're actually doing fine. And so our partners, Elvejo, that EJ group in Little Village, came to us and said, this is like obviously problematic, right? They're not considering the whole cumulative impacts that we're suffering. And so we started working together with Elvejo and with those other Chicago groups and said, well, is there a way for us to take data that are, available and try to crunch the numbers and do a cumulative impacts analysis? Chicago, Illinois, very different than California. California have much better data situation. Illinois, not that great. So what we ended up doing is we used this tool called US EPA's EJ screen tool, where it's not a cumulative impacts tool, but it's at least a centralized place where they've collected 17 social and environmental indicators and put it in one place. And they actually do that for every single block group in the United States. And so we said, look, what we can do is we can crunch some numbers on those set of indicators and come up with a cumulative score comparing all the census block groups in Chicago to each other. And when we did that, what we saw was a map that actually just lit up in red, especially in the Little Village area and especially in the Southeast side. It's not even like we had to like tweak the formula and play around with the numbers to like, we actually just took the most straightforward method that we could think of. And it's this sort of adapted environmental justice screening method that researchers actually kind of pushed as a precursor to the California tool. And we just used that, and that's exactly what we got. Now, are the data in EJ Screen perfect? No, 17 indicators obviously doesn't capture the universe of all the problems that are observed. But when we were talking with the groups, and this is part of the community partnership thing, we said, hey, do you want us to try to include other indicators, or what do you think? We could just take these from EJ Screen. And they said, the city of Chicago, it's like so far behind that maybe, yeah, it makes sense. Just take the EJ Screen indicators. They already have that legitimacy. It's like, well, if the US EPA kind of already endorses these as EJ indicators, just take these and let's just see what we get. And so we found that, yeah, we were able to get a map that showed these are really serious areas of environmental, overburdened communities, environmentally impacted communities. And I would like to say that, this has stopped all the terrible things from happening in Chicago. Unfortunately, that's not the case. It was helpful. Showing the map has helped push the new mayor to really place environmental cumulative impacts as part of their environmental justice platform. So that has been helpful. And to some extent, the groups have been able to use the map to kind of push back. There's been talks of relocating certain facilities in their neighborhoods, putting warehouses, taking an old coal plant, turning that into a warehousing. So it's just ridiculous, right? Because these are areas that are already clearly overburdened. Mm-hmm. So they've been trying to say, look, we're already lighting up in red. Don't give us more crap, basically.
Exactly.
The tools, they're just an end, right? They're not the actual means. So really where we want to push for is the policy that's going to stop this stuff from coming in. And that's when we can think about cumulative impacts as a policy measure. It should say something like, look, if you're an environmental department or a planning or zoning department, if you're trying to permit, there's somebody coming to you and says, I want a permit for a new facility. Well, you should take a look. What does that neighborhood already look like? If that neighborhood is already overburdened from a cumulative impacts point of view, you should be able to say no more, deny that permit, right? And so that's I think that's the policy that we're hoping to see translated very broadly to many places. The specific tool itself, the nuances in the data, what's relevant for a certain place, that's always going to depend on what you have available and what are those concerns, right? Are you in a rural area? Are you in a coastal area? Are you in an urban area? These things can look very different. So that needs obviously to be a discussion. But the concept of that policy, of a cumulative impacts policy, is really sort of the holy grail for a lot of EJ folks, to be able to get something that strong.
Yeah, let me add to that. So I do develop a lot of geospatial tools. So this is a big part of what we do. I put in the chat, we have 3 tools that we developed for the state of Maryland. So there are not that many statewide EJ Screen tools, as was already stated. California has the best tool. So our Maryland EJ Screen tool brings in some of the indicators from US EPA EJ Screen, but it uses the scoring formula that Cal Environmental Screen uses. So I just did a demo today for the National Wildlife Federation. We'll have some work with them. I just did a demo 2 weeks ago for our state's Pacific, Asian Pacific Islander Caucus, Latino Caucus, and Black Caucus. I did that 2 weeks ago. There's Delegate Love has submitted a cumulative impacts bill leveraging the New Jersey bill, S232, which took 10 years to pass. So the Ironbound community and some other folks that in New Jersey, Nikki Sheets was one of the authors of that bill, and the folks Kim Gaddy, right? Kim. And so that is a cumulative impacts, but one of the first ones in the country that's been passed. So we also Delegate Ivy from Prince County. He's working on an EJ Screen bill right now, and then and so we have that happening in our state. And I want to say I just had a call on Tuesday with part of the Biden Harris transition team, and the call was about what? EJ Screen. How can we use EJ Screen? In the first 100 days, they're like asking, Dr. Rachel Marla Frost, who y'all can learn more about. She helped to build the California environmental screen tool, and some other folks who work at the EPA on the EPA tool and say, what do we need to do in the first 100 days? And we talked about money, we talked about functionality, and we talked about the tools should be required to be used in decision-making, permitting. And you're exactly right. When you get to a certain threshold, don't add anything more. And actually, another way to look at using these tools is it's not just about stopping stuff, it's about community building. So where do you invest resources? Green jobs, renewables, y'all, electrification. That's I think the power of the tool is knowing who's been differentially impacted and under-resourced and where we need to focus our resources. So EJ communities are hit first, worst, and the most. So when it comes to investments, they should be the first in line and get the most investments. Okay, I'll stop there because I can talk about geospatial tools all day, but y'all can learn more by going to our website. We have a park equity tool for the state, and then we're building a climate equity health tool too. That's partly in the EJ screen tool, but it's going to be its own tool. We have COVID data in the tool right now. We have segregation data. We have some the climate tool. I mean, again, I'm gonna stop talking. Go to the website. You want to learn more about the tools? Just shoot me an email. Okay.
Thank you so much. I think now we're just going to open it up to the audience. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or type it in the chat.
I see a really interesting question in the chat. It's very fraught.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, should I start? The organizations that can make the most impact in EJs at nonprofits, government, or education? Oh gosh.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say that maybe a little, maybe for you won't be controversial, but I'll let you go first if you want to.
Okay, so I need to take off my I work for a big green hat to answer this because
I'm gonna come at that hat. Not go ahead. I'm gonna be
yeah. Okay, so this is a huge issue because as I think some of you may have been following the literature, I don't mean the scientific literature. I mean the articles that have been coming out in the Washington Post and New York Times and others all summer long after, really Black Lives Matter took the attention of the whole nation, right? And you may have been reading in some of those articles that the environmental movement in the United States was basically a very white, not exactly anti-racist movement. In fact, had very, very, how shall I say it, very bad adherence to these JEDI principles, justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, that Dr. Wilson mentioned. And this has been, and unfortunately still is, a huge problem. And it's very bad. There's a huge discrepancy in funding between what large environmental nonprofits get and what these, as I mentioned before, these grassroots organizations that are operating with very limited resources, not doing things because they are paid to do it, but because, this is their own time that they're taking right out of their day to be able to do this kind of work. And that imbalance is still extreme. Some of you may have also seen recent news on funding being offered by Bezos' Earth Fund and the way that's being deployed. And it's a very, very fraught topic right now. So you have imbalances in resources going on, and you also have this, how do I put it lightly? So basically, you also have for a very long time these large environmental organizations basically defining what is the way forward? What is the solution forward? What is politically feasible? What is not politically feasible? What should we advocate for? And it's really, and it's well-intentioned in most cases, but it's problematic because it's not exactly the most, inclusive perspective of what is possible, and hasn't historically included the voices of those who are most impacted, right? So that's at the fundamental problem. If you look at the principles for environmental justice, which Dr. Wilson mentioned, if you look at, there's these principles called the HEMES principles for democratic organizing. They really help define environmental justice, because environmental justice isn't just where you're trying to go. It's also a bit of a roadmap how you want to get there, and how you want to get there has to be inclusive. It has to be letting people speak for themselves. It has to be right. It has to be much more transformative, not extractive, and all these things. And so I would say that you know, if what your question is really getting at is like where, who should be driving the agenda and where should we be investing our time and resources? Who should we be listening to? I would say we really need to be listening a lot more to those communities that are impacted. And I think that, everything from diversifying like the voices in government, the voices in academia, to the voices even of our own, organizational boards and like who we even hire as large environmental organizations, like that's a really important task at hand. Education, academia, I also have a interesting view of that because I think that academic institutions for a very, very long time historically have also not been doing very well, and I can say that as a Hopkins graduate, right? Like I know
it's the same thing for both sectors. Go ahead, it's the same.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And it's really hard because there are, and I think, Dr. Wilson and I are both members of the American Public Health Association, which is, the large professional like organization supposed to be for public health practitioners and researchers. And like, even then, even when we try to have like these conversations about environmental justice, like we have a long way to go. There are still folks within, this community of public health professionals that don't actually quite understand why, for example, like, if you say all lives matter, like why that is a bad thing when you're trying to talk about Black Lives Matter, right? So we have a long way to go to really make sure that science is done, correctly with folks who are impacted, by folks who are impacted, and for the folks who are most impacted. So I don't know, who has the most impact?
Let me chime into it. I'm a chime in. Racism. I'm just gonna, that's just say it. The academia is racist. Environmental groups are racist. Government, many of the reasons why we are where we are today, y'all, if we enforce all the environmental rules and regulations, EPA's definition of environmental justice, we would have no environmental justice. But Flint, adhere to the lead and copper rule. That wouldn't happen in Arbor, Michigan. I did my postdoc in Arbor, right? Government, think about Baltimore. Y'all in Baltimore. Y'all know the history of Baltimore? Baltimore's the first city in this country to have racism-based zoning. It got thrown on the Supreme Court. Okay? FHA, HOLC, redlining, racist policies, GI Bill, racist implementation, National Highway Defense Act, racist, Levittown's racist, racial covenants, racist, the black codes after Reconstruction, racist, Jim Crow, everybody equal, racist, current administration, a bigot and a racist. John Muir was a racist. Okay? Racism is embedded in a lot of this, y'all. And, going back to the green groups, so even though I was being bad, I work with a lot of, I just had a conversation with Krista yesterday from your organization. So I work with my green group friends at the National Wildlife Federation. I work with my green group friends at EDF. But folks of color are struggling in a lot of these groups, not that diverse. The cultures are not that inclusive. Academia, I could talk about academia, y'all. I've dealt with racism, microaggressions, being otherwise white supremacy and white privilege as a grad student at UNC, as a postdoc at Michigan, as a professor at University of South Carolina. That's why I got on the Underground Railroad to get the hell up out of South Carolina. And even at Maryland, microaggressions. So it's hard for folks to be in these environments and try to impact change when they're constantly under stress and pressure and being undermined or otherwise. Even if you got colleagues who are in the green groups trying to do great work, because you got to change the culture. It's hard for community groups to make a way for it because, as already stated, they're not getting funding. Foundations, 3% of foundation portfolios goes to environmental justice, less than 3%. Okay, we can talk on and on about this particular issue. So who should lead the way? It should be the community, but we got to have folks who understand in the government the equity and justice issues. Green groups are making progress, right? But they still have a long way to go. Sierra Club has been having a lot of internal discussions about racism and white supremacy and white privilege. Union Concerned Scientists having the same struggles. All of these entities are having struggles with now we gotta be self-reflection, right? If we're gonna be anti-racist, we have to change. There has to be a power shift. Some folks need to retire and leave. You saw that, you may not have seen this. There was an article came out. We're gonna move to the next question. We can talk again. I can talk too much about this. There's an article that came out a couple of weeks ago, right? About why the EPA hasn't done better on environmental justice. Well, a lot of folks who work in the EPA don't believe there's racism in the country and don't believe in environmental justice. So how the heck, if you're the main agency, you're supposed to advance environmental justice, folks don't believe there's racism and don't believe there's environmental justice? Okay, I'll stop there. But no, let me continue. But I think it's important to say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, y'all. I talk about this every day. It's draining, this particular topic. It's very draining. On the National Academy of Sciences, we talk about it. Citizen Science Association, we talk about it. I'm doing 3 to 5 lectures a week, like these kind of discussions, keynotes, 3 to 5 a week, where I'm talking about how we can be anti-racist, what we can do better. I need less talk and more action. So I'll stop there. Don't ask those kind of questions again. Y'all gonna have us talking on one question all night long. Next question, go ahead.
I think that the next question was from Emmett, so I can just read that. As a college student, what is the best way to get involved in environmental justice efforts? And you guys can also talk about like your experiences in college and maybe how you started out.
I am not a good example of like a good college. I did nothing helpful for the community when I was at MIT. I think that's probably part of the problem, is that students are often encouraged to be in the bubbles that they are, especially at a place like MIT. But I will say that actually what got me thinking that maybe physics was not for me was that I had a writing professor, a Black professor, one of the few Black professors at MIT, and he wrote this book. It was called The Black Apollo of Science. His name is Kenneth Manning. And in this writing class, this seminar of like 12, 13 people, we met every week and we actually never talked about writing. What he did in every class is he would just start up these like random topics of conversation with us, and we would be sitting there like terrified, being cold called, because basically he would just pick on someone. He would say something like, "Tell me what you know about German culture," or he would say, "What is your opinion of the conflict in the Middle East?" And he would ask this question like, "What do you know about the glove of a first baseman?" And it's like these random off the topic, and like I think I now understand, like, you know, in hindsight, what he was trying to do. And he was trying to show us that, like, look, you guys think you're all smart because, you know, you took like calculus when you were like 12 years old, and you like, you know, you landed at MIT, and you think like you're like just the most brilliant person ever. But you know what? The world is a big place, and if you don't like understand how to plug into the world and you don't understand something else about the world, you are not going to be like an effective human being. And that was in that class that I first heard the term the human condition. And that was why I actually got motivated to, you know, maybe not do theoretical physics the rest of my life. And so for me, that was really informative. But I have to say that, you know, like I said, as a college student, I was really not plugged in to these other efforts. I mean, I could say a little bit more about, you know, like as a law school student, you know, you know, they have like clinics where we did a lot of public interest work, and that was the way I plugged in. I'm not sure, you know, honestly, I don't know. I'm like a little out of touch, but maybe Dr. Wilson, since you're at a university, you can speak more.
I can chime on that. No, I think, you know, as a college student, I would say join associations that focus on these issues. Unfortunately, though, and let me just say this, there are not a lot of entities, college organizations that actually focus on environmental justice. Sustainability is fine, but sustainability is not environmental justice per se. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the 17 principles of environmental justice, sustainability, conservation, respect for Mother Earth, indigenous rights, human rights, it's public health, it's all embedded there, right? It's very holistic. But sustainability, it doesn't bring in justice, it's superficial in my opinion. So look at Julian Agamon's work, Just Sustainability, Just Transit, Just Food, Just Housing, Just Healthcare, Just Education, Just Jobs. Think about COVID-19. If we had just all those things, we wouldn't have the disparities, right? We wouldn't have so many people who have been impacted, right? And so join an association, start an organization. 17 for Peace and Justice, we have a college chapter, right? And it's for college students. I just met a group, I just did a presentation last week for a new EJ group at George Washington. So you could start an EJ group at Hopkins. You know, one of my good friends who I worked with for 20 years is Dr. Chris Haney at Hopkins. Chris is all about EJ. We work with Omega Wilson together as grad students at UNC Chapel Hill. So if you want us to get some mentoring and want to maybe advise it for a new undergrad EJ group, talk to Chris, Dr. Heaney. Also in Baltimore, you got work with the United Workers, right? You can work with United Workers. You got some of the folks with Clean Water Action doing EJ work. You got folks with Blue Water Baltimore doing EJ work. You got the West Baltimore Partnership, I think, doing EJ work. So engage with them. You also got folks that you got your colleagues at the Historically Black Colleges in Baltimore, folks at Coppin and Morgan. They got folks at Morgan doing EJ work too. Okay. And then I would say join the professional associations. I'm a former chair of the environment section at APHA. I actually started the EJ committee for environment section about 12 years ago. Okay. Join the American Public Association. I think there's many things you can do. When I was a college student, I didn't do as much EJ work on the front end until after 95, my sophomore year. I did a little bit of EJ work in Huntsville at A&M, but I mostly did research and it was preparation for grad school. I did some internships at the EPA where I got more experience with environmental justice. Some of y'all may have been born, but I'm gonna say this, y'all weren't born. I worked at the EPA in Atlanta during the Summer Olympics. Some of y'all weren't born yet, so I'm a little bit older than y'all, but yeah. So I got a lot of experience doing EJ work there. And then also I worked at the Tennessee Valley Authority as an internship. And I had other internships as well that got me some exposure with environmental justice and health. So do those internships are really important too. So I'll stop there.
We can move on to Mashiat's question in the chat. I think this is also kind of like college, but maybe from an undergraduate to where you are now, how has your arc of interests or work changed, and what have been some of the biggest challenges and lessons in your professional development?
I'll do a quick follow-up first. I knew what I wanted to do after I met Dr. Bullard and Dr. Wright, right? I still have a photo with them. Like I had like a long little goatee and I had them both just hugging. Actually, we redid that photo like 2 years ago. Dr. Wright and Dr. Bullard and Dr. Beverly Wright do this annual Historically Black College Climate Change Conference at Dillard. Even though you're not at HBCU, you should look at that conference. To me, it was one of the best conferences for students in the country, right? And I did another picture with them, like how many years later? Like 25 years later. That was pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, I've known what I wanted to do. So when I went to grad school, I was mentored by Dr. Wing, right? But Dr. Wing was in epidemiology. Folks in environmental science engineering at UNC, they didn't respect the value of environmental justice. It was tough. It was tough. And so it was really important for y'all to find a mentor who's into environmental justice, who's going to support your passion and your interests. So that's important. And then, and I work with Omega Wilson. We don't have a strong EJ network in our region. I'm also in the process of helping to take the DMV EJ Coalition, kind of breathe some new life into it, and building a region-wide EJ network to include Delaware, so DMV and Delaware. So we're working on that. And so that will be a way for some of your students. We got community partners dealing with CAFOs, CAIC dealing with CAFOs you can connect to. You got folks in Center for Livable Future that y'all can work with as well at Hopkins. We got folks in Baltimore, like I said, United Workers that you can work with. But a lot of my work, after grad, I've been always doing EJ, y'all. And I think the worst part of my experience as professional has been, dealing with the otherism, y'all. It's been bad. Been otherized, dealing with imposter syndrome, dealing with white privilege, and then my kind of work has been devalued and undermined. But on the positive side, my emotional nutrition has come from the community. Helping to shut down the incinerator in Charleston, helping to change zoning, helping to stop a permit process with the fly. I'm having real impact with my work. So that really makes me excited to continue doing the work, even if I'm in an academic environment where I'm not fully valued and appreciated. And unfortunately, that's been that way since grad school. My best experience in higher education was in college, because those mentors at A&M really valued me, really uplifted me, gave me enriching opportunities, and really cared for me personally. Besides Dr. Wing, at UNC, I haven't had the same kind of mentoring since, so you gotta find those mentors. Now I'll stop there.
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about the arc. I think, gosh, some of the biggest challenges. I mean, I think for me, it's or like the lessons, I guess, it is similar to what Dr. Wilson's saying. Like, I think it's really hard, I guess, from where I sit, or even being in academia, to feel like, if you're in it or you're doing what you want because you're expecting, to advance within an organization, or if some level of like positive reinforcement matters a lot to you, sometimes that is like not what you should be like holding out hope for. Like for me, like the real motivation comes from like meeting with community members, or like sometimes seeing the change. Sometimes you don't see the change, but you know what? It's like you get this feeling like, well, you know what? Like, I don't really know if everything's going to work out in the end, right? Like that whole saying for that you have about the moral arc of the universe being long, but it bends towards justice. I'm not really sure I necessarily believe that. Like sometimes I look around like, holy shit, like what are we doing? But that doesn't change like what I feel like I should be doing today. Even if I knew that the ending was going to be bad, like there are certain things that should compel you to act, right? That should compel you to do what you do. And that's for me like the driving force. So and it's hard because like it's really hard to count on like large organizations or ones where like they have so many different identities, like you don't know, like there's changes in
Mhm.
leadership. It's just like sometimes it can be really frustrating, and it's very sometimes disheartening seeing like especially your like Black colleagues and other like people of color staff, like the degree to which they are feeling burnt out and drained because they're constantly having to try to change an organizational culture. Like that is really, really hard. And so like I would say, if you can find like holding on to whatever it is that gives you motivation, I think that's the key to like surviving.
Yeah, just to add on that real quick, you got to know your why. And even if you have all these challenges, if you know your why, you know your life's mission, nothing can stop you. Even all the challenges I've had across, academia, grad school to now, no one's stopping me. I know my why, I know my life's mission, and so that gives me power too, right, to keep moving forward. And I like to say, I'm a 1 foot in, 1 foot out, 1 foot in academia, 1 foot out. My job is to get resources from academia to help the communities I serve, right? And so that's why, but I also know my why. So, I mean, I'm telling you, I work hard, y'all. I'm a workaholic. Not just a positive thing. Don't be a workaholic. Have some good work-life balance. Okay. One of the things I do with my little girls, we watch Inuyasha. If y'all know anything about anime, Inuyasha, they fell, just to let you know, they fell in love with Inuyasha. It's gonna be like an Inuyasha Christmas so for my little girls. But you gotta have some balance, y'all. But you gotta know what your why is. And again, be surrounded by people whose whys are congruent in concordance with your why. Mentors, colleagues, friends. Not saying people they don't have to have differences of opinion, but if y'all motivated and passionate about environmental justice or environmental activism and you want to make change, have a peer network that you can be a part of. There's an environmental leadership program. It's something you may want to look at as you graduate and join in that. Join Chesapeake Conservation Corps. I think NRDC, EDF, and National Wildlife Federation, they all have some programs for young professionals in the environment. Do y'all have a program like that, NRDC? A program, internship
Probably.
program?
Yeah, I'm not even sure that's how big we are. I'm afraid to say I don't know. But I mean, we definitely have things like the internship programs and so forth. I don't know the extent to which we cultivate like a cohort at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that
Yeah.
if you can find that type of a training opportunity where you're in a cohort, it's always better to matriculate and kind of go through things with other people so you can share. So you're not by yourself. You're not isolated. When you become isolated, that's when you lose, right? You kind of lose yourself, and then the communities that we work in, they need you. They need your passion. They need your motivation. They need your skills. They need your energy. They need your love, right? It's because EJ is about hope, love, family, and our shared humanity, and they need that. Okay.
Thank you. I know we're at time, so before everyone logs off, we're gonna send out a poll right now, so please fill it out. Otherwise, thank you so much to both of you for being on our panel tonight. This was an incredible conversation. And I, as an undergraduate, obviously, I am just inspired and so ready to get started and take actions. Hopefully, the rest of our audience also feels that way. So, thank you again. We learned a whole lot tonight. Um, we'll make
Welcome.
sure to send out a follow-up email to our audience with the link and also a lot of the resources both of our panelists shared. So look forward to that. Otherwise, everyone have a wonderful night. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Lim. You're doing
Thank
great
you.
work.
It was great to meet you finally. I can always hear your name. Christy's actually my supervisor. So
Okay, yeah, I talked to Christy yesterday. Yeah, we talked yesterday. Or was
oh,
it
awesome.
Tuesday or Wednesday? So yeah,
The taste.
great work. Thank you.
Have a good
Thank
one.
you both so much. This was so excellent. I learned a lot. Thank you for answering my hard question. I'm sorry for putting you on the spot there.
Oh, it's fine. You're welcome. Thanks, everybody. Y'all enjoy Thanksgiving and watch out for those turduckens. So
have a great night, all. Thank you so much.